And what we're saying is right now, starting from the smallest screen size all the way up to the biggest screen size possible, this is going to have one column. There's going to be only one column over here. Now, within the column, what we would want. Well, first, let's start over here with a standard heading. So I'm just going to type over here heading 1, and over here, once I press over here for these curly brackets, now with an emmet, I can write a text over here. So here we're going to say standard, and we're just going to say over here heading. Now, once again, you can see that abbreviation. So if I'm just going to press tab, now I have my heading 1. Now, after the heading, now once I save it, you can see over here, this is going to be my standard heading. And after the heading, what I would want is a paragraph. So I'm just going to say again, P. I'm going to type P. And over here, let's do open up a paragraph. And then let's do a dummy text. So with an emmet, we can just like lorem. And then once we have the lorem, we can choose how many words we would want. So let's say 10 or 20, or let's say 100, whatever, how many amount we would want. So let's say we're going to start with 20. So I'm going to type lorem 20, press tab, and sure enough, you can see over here, this is going to be my text. Now, after the paragraph, let's look at how we can create a buttons. So once the paragraph is done, let's create a button. So we're going to create a button element. Now within the button element, we need to write a type, and we're just going to go with type of button. And after that, now we would need to add classes. So for the Bootstrap, we would need to add class of BTN, and we can add this BTN to a link, or we can add this to the button. It's really how we would want. So here we're going to say over here that this is going to be the class, and let's say that this is going to be BTN. So we always need to start with this BTN. Now we're not limited over here to just class of BTN. We also can add, let's say, color. So if I'm going to write BTN primary, this is going to stand over here for the blue button. See over here, this is our button. Now over here, let's say that this is going to be primary button over here. So let's save this, and sure enough, we have a primary button. Now in the button, we also can add margins and paddings. So if I'm going to go over here, and if I'm going to type P, this is going to stand for a padding. If I'm going to type over here M, this is actually going to stand for margin. And Bootstrap is not using pixels, it's using the REM values. And we have an option of going from 0 to all the way to the 5. So 5 would be the biggest one. So if I'm going to say over here M5 over here, this would be the biggest one. So I can see that there's a big margin all around. And 0 would be no margin whatsoever. So if I'm going to save this, there's going to be no margin whatsoever. So the same goes over here for the padding. If I'm going to say that this is going to be padding 5, this obviously is going to be the biggest padding. If I'm going to say with padding 0, you can see that the padding is over here going to be 0. Now, if I just type one letter over here, what's happening is whatever I selected is going to be all around. So margin is all around and padding is all around. So again, if I'm going to go back to, let's say over here, something like 3, you can see that both of them applied all around. However, I have an option of actually working just with the sides. So let's say with the padding, which is a little bit easier to see, if I would say top over here, PT, this would only have the padding on the top. Then on the left, this would only have a padding on the left, then in the bottom and on the right. Now, I designed this project, so we're going to be looking at few examples. So for now, I'm just going to leave this all around. So I'm just going to say over here that this is going to be margin 2 all around and padding 2 all around. And what I'm going to do over here, we're going to create another button. So we have two options. We can write another button over here, or we can just select this button and actually copy and paste it and just change the values. So I'm going to copy and paste this button, and now I have my second button. Now the difference over here is I'm going to change a few of these classes around just to see how we can change the styles with a different Bootstrap class. So let's say I'm going to say not button primary, I'm going to say button danger. Also, I'm going to say that margin is going to be 3 instead of 2, and padding is going to be 3 instead of 2. I'm going to save this, and over here you can see that I have primary button, which is going to be red. Now the case over here is obviously we can see that we are changing right now colors in between the buttons by adding this button primary or danger. Now we're obviously not limited to just these two, and like I said, throughout this first section, we're going to be looking at a few different examples. So what I'm going to write over here, I'm going to say that this is going to be over here danger. So once I save this, this is going to be primary button, and this is going to be the danger button. Now, once we have worked with a buttons, let's look at how we can work with a background. Because whenever we're working with a Bootstrap, we're not just limited to adding, let's say, background to the button. If we're going to go back to the container, and we can write over here that we would want secondary. Now, what's happening over here? Now, this whole container gets right away this background. And again, I could have just went over here and said that I would want just for the heading some kind of background. I mean, I can still do it over here. I can add the same thing. I can say I would want class, and then over here in the class, I'm just going to add over here some kind of background. But the reason for the container is then the whole element just basically gets a background. Now, once we have a background, again, we're not limited to this just one color. And as you can see over here, we're going to be looking at different color options as we're working throughout this section. But we can also have a text color. So I'm going to write over here text, and we're going to say white. So what happens, the whole container gets right away white color. Now, once we have the white color all around the text, let's have a look how in a paragraph we can actually override this. So if I'm going to say over here class for the paragraph, and within the class, what I'm going to say is this is going to be text. So as you can see over here, again, I need to start the same way how I'm writing text. Now here I'm going to change what color is going to be. So here I'm going to say danger. So this text, instead of the whole container, gets a red color, and the rest of the text has actually white color. So if I'm going to go back over here, and if I'm going to look at my start, which is I opened up in a browser, this is going to be in my live preview. This is going to be in a live browser. And if I'm going to save this, we have our first Bootstrap container that has a heading. Over here, it has a paragraph, and over here, these would be two buttons. So as I'm shrinking or expanding the screen, you can see how our container is actually changing the width and changing also here the paddings, because this is going to be the container. And next one, we're going to look at how we can work with a container fluid. Once we have built our first Bootstrap container, now let's look at how we can build a container fluid. So over here, we're going to go to the bottom of where this container ends. Over here, you can see that this would be the opening and this would be the closing tag. And over here, I'm going to create a comment. I'm just going to say end of container, just so we don't start nesting actually this container within the previous one. So once we have this covered, the comment, again, as always, let's start by creating a div. Only in this case, we're going to be creating a container, and we're going to say that this is going to be fluid over here like this. Once we have the container fluid, now let's create a row. So div with the class of row. And over here the same way, let's just create a basic column starting from the smallest screen all the way to the biggest screen. Now within the column, let's start by looking at a display class. So we're going to say over here that this was going to be my heading 1. Only in this case, we're going to add a class of display, and we're going to say over here the option of 1. Now the 1 would be the biggest one, and the 4 would be the smallest one. And display actually is really nice if we would want to create some kind of titles. So over here, I'm just going to write that this is going to be display number 1 over here. But in general, you would use it for the title. So if I'm going to save it over here, you can see that I have a massive piece of text over here, which says display 1. Now, if I'm going to make my screen a little bit bigger, you can see that it's going to line up a little bit better. Now, we're not limited to adding this display to a heading 1. If I'm just going to copy and paste this over here, and if I'm going to change these tags, see over here, now I have heading 1. But if I'm going to change this actually to the paragraph, I'm going to get the same deal. So what happens is if I'm going to add this class to a paragraph, it's going to act the same way as the heading would actually act, because I added over here the class of display. So that's the important one, not the element where we're adding. And over here, let's look at a smallest one over here like this. So save it, and this is going to be actually display 4. So if I'm going to go back over here, I'm going to say that this is going to be display 4. After display, now let's look at how we can work with a paragraphs. So let's create another paragraph, and over here for this paragraph, let's say that first we would want a text of success. So what's happening is now we want not text danger, which would be a red text. We actually would want a text success, which is going to make this paragraph green. And over here, we're going to write again lorem 20, which is going to create a dummy text of 20 words. And sure enough, over here, now we have a text that is actually green color because we added this text success class. Now also a lot, we're going to be adding the class of lead. So here, if I'm going to go to the paragraph and if I'm going to add this class, you see over here, our line height changed, our padding changed, and the font size increased. So if you want some kind of paragraph to stand out throughout the project, we're going to be using a lot of class lead. And last but not least, let's look at how we can add paddings and how we can add paddings to a left and right. So if we know that we had an option of all around, top, bottom, left, right, we also have an option of horizontal direction or vertical direction. So for the horizontal direction, we're going to say px or mx, or for vertical, we're going to say py or my. So here we're going to say that this is going to be px, so this is going to be padding horizontal direction and the biggest padding that there is, because I'm going to say 5 over here. So now you can see over here how my padding on the sides right away increased. And once we have covered a paragraph, now let's create 3 buttons and look at how again we can change the colors and how we can change the margins. So again, let's start over here with a button. Now for the button, right away, let's add a class over here, btn, and also let's say that this is going to be a button with a dark background. So we're going to say over here, this is going to be the dark. So I'm going to press it over here, and sure enough, now I have my button. Now over here, I'm going to say btn dark. So this is going to be my dark button. And over here, this would be the button. Now, once I have the dark button, now let's look at how we can change the actual text. And we already know that we can just go over here and we're going to say text danger. Like I said, we're not limited adding this text to headings or paragraphs. We can actually go over here and change the text for our button. Also, let's look at how we can have a margin top, and we're going to say that this is going to be what? This is going to be, let's say, 4 over here. So now what's going to happen? This margin should actually increase. Sure enough, this button actually moved down because we added over here this margin top. Now the last thing, let's just add an attribute of type, and we're going to say that this type is going to be button. So if I want to copy this button, I'm just going to select it over here, and we're just going to copy it 2 times. So once I have copied, now I have 3 button darks. Now what I would want to change over here. Well, first let's change over here from dark, from this button dark class, to a success. So let me delete this, and let's write that this is going to be button success. And we know that with success we would have a green color, and in this case this would be a green background. And over here, let's also change this success over here. Let's save it, and now we have the button that has a green background. Also, I would want to change a text, and for this text, I'm actually going to say that this is going to be muted, and muted is going to give this grayish color over here. So now I can see that I have green button with a gray text. And over here, let's change from margin top to a margin bottom. So this is going to be the same value. However, here you can see that this is pushing down, and right now this margin is applied to the bottom, so it's pushing the button actually up. And the last button, I would want to change the actual background. So we're going to say over here that this is going to be secondary. Now you're not going to see that big of a difference. I mean, you do, but in general, this is gray color. So secondary would be gray one over here, and it would be lighter actually from over here, this dark. Now after that, we would want a text primary. So again, we're going to change danger from the primary over here, and now we have this button. And last but not least, again, let's check it out how we can apply margin, again, left and right, not only one direction. So I'm going to save it, and sure enough, right now we have margin left and right. And last but not least, let's go up to the actual container. And let's say over here that this is going to be background warning, which is going to make this a yellow background. Let's make this a text dark. So I'd want to make the whole text dark. I'm going to say text dark. However, as we can see, we're not actually changing anything over here in this paragraph. And the reason for that is because you see over here, we have our own specific class over here. So we're just adding a text dark to the whole thing, which in this case comes out to be only for these settings because the buttons also have their own text class. And last but not least, let's look at how we can add padding and vertical padding. So we're going to say PY, so it's going to be up and down. And let's use the biggest one there is, which is going to be 5. And this is how our container fluid would look like. So I'm going to go back over here, and this is going to be our start in the browser. Let's refresh. And now we have first container, and this is going to be our first container fluid. And like I said, and like I have said, I think more than enough times, that this one is going to have the padding, and over here the container fluid wouldn't have the padding. It wouldn't be responsive. It would always have this 100% width over here. After we have tackled our first container and container fluid, now let's look at how in a project we're going to be using a section element. So like always, over here, what we're going to say is this is going to be end of and whatever section we created over here. So here I'm going to say container and we're going to say fluid. So this is going to be the end of container fluid. And over here, we're going to start with our first section. So like I said, basically in the Bootstrap, you're always going to have some kind of syntax like this, where we're going to be creating a container like a wrapper. And once you have the container, you're going to be placing everything inside here. Now the difference in the project, we're going to be using a section element for the grouping. So actually we're going to write like this. We're going to have a section, then we're going to have a container, and then we're going to be working with a rest of the rows and columns. And the reason why I'm using a section, there is no particular one. I could have just used some kind of div, let's say, and right over here a class. However, it's better to use sections for a semantics. And what also section allows us to do, it allows us to fix the fact that over here the padding is for container and we might be missing a background color, like for the first container that we created. So let me show you by example. So let's say over here we would have this div class of container, and let's say over here we're going to have a background and we're going to say danger. Now if I'm going to write some type of text over here, so let's say that I'm going to have, this is going to be heading 1, and we're going to call this section example over here. Once we save this, over here you can see that I have a section example. Now over here you can see that I misspelled danger. That's why the red color is not showing up. If I have it over here, you can see that I have a section example. And if I'm going to go back over here to a actual start and refresh, see over here, I have these white sides because of the padding. So let's say, what if I would want this whole thing to be red, but still would want to use over here this container? I wouldn't want to go back to this container fluid. Well, I can just do it over here like this. I can get rid of this class from the container and go back to the section, since the section is actually wrapping everything. And over here, I'm going to say class, and I'm going to say that this is going to be background danger. So in this case, now I get the best of the both worlds, because what's happening is now my background is going to be red all around. However, I'm still keeping the padding over here. You can see that it's not working as a container fluid. I still get the padding. So that's another benefit how we can actually work with a section. And one more benefit is later on, once we're going to be working in the project, what's going to happen is we're going to add even ID over here. So let's say we're going to say that this is going to be skills section. And once we have the ID, we can go to our main CSS and start applying a custom styles, because obviously not always we will be satisfied with the colors that we're getting over here, or styles or paddings or anything that we would want. So with CSS, we would make it more custom. So this would be another reason why we should be adding over here these sections. Now again, you don't need to really use this as a section. You can use whatever divs you would want, but in this case, I just like using a sections for semantics. Now, once we have over here this container, and then we have a heading 1. Now, what I would want actually is to get rid of it for a second and add the row and the column properly. So let's say over here that we're going to say this is going to be a column, and my apologies, because actually we need to create a row first. So let me create a row, and let me actually grab this guy over here and bring it in. So now this would be a row that's actually wrapping around the column. Now, what we would want in these columns. So like I said, first let's do a heading 1, and let's just add a class, and we're going to say that this class is going to be text white. So we're going to make a white text. And what we would want over here, we would want a section example. So this is going to be our text. So section example over here. Now this text is going to be white. Maybe let's change this one to danger to just dark over here. So this is going to be our background. Now, once we have the heading 1, let's look at how we can work with a paragraph and again with display. So let's go down over here and let's start a new line. And we're going to say that this is going to be paragraph and this is going to be display over here 4. So this would be the display property that we used before. And we also would want a text warning over here. So this is going to make our text yellow. And over here, we're going to say paragraph display. So let's save this over here. And sure enough, right now we have a paragraph display. Now, once we have looked at a paragraph with display property, next, let's look at 2 paragraphs and how we can work with a text colors and paddings. So let's say over here that we have another text, and over here we're going to say that this paragraph is going to have few classes. First one is going to be text info, which is going to make this green bluish color to the text. And next we're going to have a padding left and right 5. So let's do a text of, let's say, 20 words. So we open it up, and sure enough, what we have over here is this text that has this green bluish color, and over here we have these paddings on the right and on the left. And now we can also look at how we would work with just centering the text. So if I'm going to write over here that this is going to be text, and instead of colors, we also have an option of saying, let's say that this is going to be text right. So what's going to happen is this text actually moves right. Now we're not limited to the right, we can write center. And once we center the text, you can see that this text is going to be in the center. Now we also have a left. However, left is actually a default. So over here, if I'm going to write left, you'll see that nothing changed. However, what's going to happen is, let's say that if I'm going to go back over here and I'm going to say that I would want for the whole row, I would want actually a text center. So let's find a row. Let's have a text and we're going to say center. Not success, we're going to say center. So we're going to apply this class for the whole row. However, this guy still stays over here on the left because we more specifically applied over here. So if I'm going to delete this and if I'm going to save this, you can see that this also goes in the center. Now, for now, let's just have it in a right position over here. So we'll save this and it's going to go all the way to the right. Now, once we have our first paragraph over here with a text centering property class, let's have another one. Let's say that this is going to be a paragraph again. This is going to be text light, so the color is going to be light. Then we're going to have a text left, which is again make the default one property on the element that's within a text center parent. And here let's do a padding top bottom 4. Press tab over here and let's add another 20 words over here. Press tab and now we have 2 paragraphs. Save this and sure enough now we have 2 of them. And since these 2 paragraphs have been added, now let's look at more properties regarding buttons. So let's start again by creating a button. Now for the button, we would want few classes. So maybe let's start with a type attribute. And then over here, we're going to have some classes. For the classes, we would want btn, which we always need to add. And then let's do a call of warning. So let's make this a yellow. And then we're going to have a text secondary over here. Save this and let's just write something. Let's say that this is going to be btn warning. Save this, and over here we have our button warning. Now let's copy and paste this, and let's just again change the values around so we can see how we can actually work with the classes and how does it look like. So again, I'm just going to be selecting this. So I'm just going to say over here that this is going to be my button, and I'm going to copy and paste this 2 more times. And again, the only thing we need to do is start changing these classes. So over here, the next one would be info. So let's change over here to info. Then we'll have a text dark over here. And next one, we're going to say that this is going to be light and text is going to be dark. So we're going to keep the text dark. So here, let's say this is going to be light and this is going to be dark over here like this. So we're going to save this, and maybe let's change it around what it says. So over here, if we would want to actually change them, we're going to select them both over here, and I'm going to write that this is going to be actually info. So I'm going to say info, and last one is going to be light. So this is going to be button light. And now let's look at how, when working with section, how we can center them, how we would actually place them in the center vertically. Now we have a few options over here with a Bootstrap. First things first, we can actually apply a padding. So if I'm going to go to a skills, if I'm going to say that this is going to be padding top bottom, I can just say over here 5. So you see what happens. Now I'm getting over here this padding on the top and also on the bottom. Now I also can go back to a main CSS and apply specific padding. So if I'm going to go back over here to main CSS, and like I said, we're going to be selecting a div with an ID of skills. So I'm going to say skills over here. And now what we would want is a padding. Now, once we have the padding, the first property is going to be top bottom, and the second one is actually going to be left and right. So let's say over here, 400 pixels. So top bottom, and left and right is going to be 0. Now, once I save this, actually nothing happens. And the reason why nothing happens, you see over here, this is going to be the Bootstrap class that we already added. So we have 2 options. Now, if we have added the class, we can get rid of the class, and then now the padding is applied. Or if we have, let's say, a class, but we would want to override this, we need to go back over here to a main CSS, have an exclamation mark, and over here we're going to say important. So now we're actually overriding the class, because basically what happens is the biggest use that we have from the Bootstrap is that these classes are already pre-made. So if we just write simple over here a rule, this is not going to work, because this padding is already pre-written of how it should look like. So only if we're using this important, then it's going to work, unless that class doesn't exist. So if the padding class from Bootstrap doesn't exist, you can do whatever how you would want. Well, this is all fine and nice. What we would want is actually would want to have some kind of way how we would apply the width and the height for the whole, let's say, section, and then place it in the center, not by adding the paddings. Now you can do the paddings, but I'm going to show you a better way. So let's say over here that, again, we're just going to get rid of this. I'm going to say we wouldn't want any padding. Now, first, what we would want is we would want to apply the height. Now, for the height, what we have is in the Bootstrap, we have a row. And if you remember from the tutorial, row is actually flexbox, parent container in the Bootstrap. So how does it work? First, we have an option where we have align items, and then let's say over here we're going to use center. Now what's happening is this aligns items in the center using the flexbox properties. Now the problem over here is, even though I have this class, I cannot right now use it because you can see that everything is crammed together. So I need to add some kind of height to this row to actually use it. So here what I can do is I can just, let's say, create a class. And again, you can name this class a monkey. It doesn't really matter. I'm just going to say that this class is going to be height class. That's all it is. And I'm going to go back over here to the main CSS, and I'm going to target this class. So I'm going to say over here that this is going to be height class. And here I have a few options. So let's say over here, I'm going to have height. And let's say, let's use 1,000 pixels. So let's make, I added the whole height for the class. Over here you can see. And once I added this height, then this class was applied to a row. And then I use this align items, which is aligning items vertically, and place it in the center. Now, like everything in a Bootstrap, we're not limited to this. I can say end. Now it's going to be all the way in the bottom. I can say start. The start is again going to be the default one. So now we're adding back to the start. Like I said, while this is fine and dandy, you can always do it. There is even a better way. Now the better way is actually using a min height and view heights properties. So let's say I'm just gonna comment this out just so you have it for your own knowledge. And instead of height, we're gonna use a min height. So what I'm saying is, doesn't matter of the content. I would always want some kind of minimal height over here. That's first. So it doesn't matter if the content, even the content is just one line, I would want some kind of minimal height. And next we're going to use a view heights. And what view heights are the percentages of whatever screen you have over here. So you can see over here, now I'm looking at the screen. So this is going to be my height, starting from here all the way down to here. So what I'm saying is, I would want this height over here, this class, to use the whole thing. Now I'm not limited to 100, but I'll show you that in a second. So if I save this, what happens if I scroll down, check it out what I have. It's exactly 100 right now. I tried to keep scrolling, but I cannot. And if I go up, I can see right away that my next one starts. So this one is using on every screen size. This is going to be using 100 view heights. And it's really nice if you want to have a consistency. And sure enough, if I'm going to go back over here, again, I can do the same thing. If I had a start, let's put it in the center. And this is what we're going to be doing a lot in the project. We're going to be using these view heights to actually make this 100% of the window that we're looking at. And we're going to place it in the center over here like this. Now, later on, we're going to look at other flexbox properties that actually we already covered before, which dealing with horizontal aligning. However, this property itself by align items, you're going to be using a lot throughout a project and is very, very useful. And what we need to remember is we can use it with a row because row automatically is a parent element in the Bootstrap, Flexbox parent element. However, there needs to be some kind of height. You cannot just, if your content takes up the whole space anyway, nothing is going to change by just applying this class. So you need to have some kind of height over here. So if we're going to go back over here, this is going to be my start. I'm going to refresh, and sure enough, you can see over here that I have these 100 view heights. Now we're not, again, as always, I keep repeating, we're not limited to just this 100. Now, sure enough, we can do 50. Now just remember though, 50, you can see that my text is taking 50 anyway. So again, nothing changed. So I need to have something that makes sense, that is bigger than what my text is taking. So let's say over here 70. So now again, it's a little bit smaller. Let's say 80. So now I can see that slowly I'm starting to get it in the center, and I actually have some padding over it because you can see that my text is taking so much space anyway. So right now, this does make sense going in 100 because then actually it looks a little bit better. So save this, and sure enough, we have over here. And of course, we can go more. If you want, we can go 130. So now, sure enough, now you can see I have to scroll down actually. But mostly I'm going to be using between 60 and, of course, most of the time it's going to be 100. Once we have finished our first section, let's create our second section. And our second section is actually going to resemble more of a header that we will going to be using later on in our project. So here, as usual, we're just going to have a comment, and we're going to say end of first section. Then again, we're going to create a new section. So we're going to say over here section. Now, in this case, for the section, we're not going to have any kind of ID. We're just going to have a class of background light. So here, I'm just going to write this is going to be BG, and over here light. Now, once I have this class over here and I save it, you can see that right now I don't see anything. But let's keep on going, and let's add the container, the row, and the column. So we're going to do container. Then we're gonna do a row, so container with a class of row, and that class of row is also gonna have a class of column. So we're here. Once we save this, now we have the container, row, and column. Now, if you remember in the last video, in the CSS, we created this height class. So in this case, we're going to use the same class. The only thing over here, I'm going to change it back from 130 actually to 100. Then I'm going to go back to a HTML. And since I know that row is going to be a flexbox parent container in the Bootstrap, I'm just going to go over here and I'm going to add a height to my row. So see what happens. I have this guy that's going to be exactly 100. You see it takes up my whole window, the first section. And as I scroll down, the same case over here. Now I have my second section that also takes 100 view heights. So now once we have this second section, next start placing actually elements in the column. So the first element we would want to place is going to be heading. Now this heading one is going to have few classes. So the first class is going to be display2, just to get that title look. Then we're going to have text danger for the red fonts, and then we're going to have a text uppercase, and then we're going to write what we would want to place inside. So here we're just going to write that this is going to be Udemy. So once we have this over here, I'm just going to press tab, and sure enough, now we have my heading 1, which is going to be with a display2 class. Now once we have the heading 1, now in the next line, let's create a paragraph. This paragraph is going to have a few classes also. So the first one is going to be text muted to get that gray look. Then we're going to say this is going to be class of lead to get the line heights and padding, so it looks a little bit more presentable. And over here, we're going to have a margin, top, bottom 4. So again, we're going to press over here tab. Then we're going to have place some text inside. So again, let's say something 20, save it. And over here, this is going to be our paragraph. Now, after the paragraph, we're going to look at how we can create links in the Bootstrap as buttons. So we knew already before we can create a button, and then we need to add class of btn and btn info. Well, over here, what I'm going to do, I'm going to create a link instead. And for a link, we know that we need to have an href. So for the href, we're just going to leave it whatever it is. So here, I'm just going to say that this is going to be the link. And you can see that it creates an href for me, but I'm going to place a hashtag over here. Now, in order to make this link like a button, I need to add a class again. Now, what classes I'm going to be adding? Well, first of all, always I need to add this button class. And rest of the classes, again, are going to have to do with the styling. So here I'm going to say secondary. This is going to be for a gray color. Then I'm going to say that there's going to be text danger, which is going to be for the red text. And then we're going to have, again, text uppercase. And then we're going to have padding 3. So padding 3 is going to be all around. And then we're going to have margin top, which is also going to be 3. So let's save this. And sure enough, over here, this is going to be our button. Now we need to place some text inside over here. So I'm just going to say over here that this is going to be explore. And as you can see over here, my text is going to be uppercase because of this. And text is going to be red because of this text danger class. Now, what else can we do? Well, you know what? Let's create the same button. Let's just change the colors for the button. So I'm going to say over here that I would want to select this link over here. And I'm just going to copy and paste this and create a new link. And here we're just going to change, again, few classes. Well, first we're going to say that button is not going to be secondary. This is actually going to be dark. So we're going to say that this is going to be dark. We're also going to change it from text danger over here to the text light. And once we have the text light, we're going to keep the text uppercase. Padding, we're going to keep the same thing. And margin top also, we're going to keep the same. Now, the only difference over here, if I save this, what I would want is I would want to add a margin that is horizontal. So I'm going to go back over here. I'm just going to write that this is going to be MX over here and 3. And we save it, and you can see that we're getting this margin that is on a left and a right. Now, once we're done with this, you can see that we have this 100 view heights for the window. And what I would want is I would actually want to place this in the center. And we know that row is a flexbox parent container in a Bootstrap. I know I'm repeating this probably 7 times already, but I think it's important in the beginning just to kind of drill down those main concepts, so it's actually easier for you later on. So if we know that right now we added already height, and this is a flexbox parent container, we know that in order to align actually in the center, we're going to do align items over here in the center. Now we also have an option for the flexbox whenever we're working on Bootstrap to align it in the center horizontally. And the class for that is going to be justify content. And over here, we're going to have also options. And let's start over here with center. Now, the problem in this case is we are using one column over here because you can see that nothing pretty much happened. We added this class, but it's not really what we want. Over here, you can see that this is going to be using whatever height is over here for this heading 1, and then the paragraph is going to be spanning all across. And the reason for that is the column is going to take up the whole space over here. This class right now is not working. So what we need over here is we know that in Bootstrap, everything is divided in 12 columns. And if we just write one column right now like this, that means that it's spanning all across from the smaller screen all the way to the biggest. Well, if we know that this sum is going to be 12, how about if we actually create a width for this column over here? So let's say over here, I'm going to add that this is going to be column 9, and I'm going to save it. And check it out what happens over here. Then everything right away goes in the center, because right now, actually this column has some kind of width. So the same way how you needed some kind of height for this vertical class over here to work, the same thing works over here. If we just add one column, this class is not going to be working. However, if we're going to add some kind of width over here for this column, then this justify content class with this center option is going to be working. Again, there's going to be a couple of other ways that we can place it in a start. We can place it in the end. The start is going to be default, and we will going to be covering those things later on. Right now, let's just focus on both of these center ones. So one is going to be center vertically, and then we have horizontally. So if I'm going to save this over here, and if we're going to go to the file that we opened in the browser, and if I'm going to refresh, sure enough, this is what I have. So I have over here my column that's going to be spanning 9, and you can see that it's actually placed in the center. And you can see that it's taking up whole width over here and the whole height. And this would be our first header section that we have created so far in this Bootstrap course. So far in our examples, we were using all the time one column, or we added some kind of width to our one column. Well, in this case, we're going to start looking actually how the Bootstrap grid works. And for this, first, as always, what we would want is first to create some type of over here a comment that it would say that this would be the end of the section. So over here, we're going to say end of second section over here. And again, let's create a new section. So here we're going to say that this is going to be a section, and the section is going to have a few classes. So we're going to have over here class, and we're going to say that this is going to be BG primary over here. So let's give it a blue background. So primary, and then we'll say over here that this is also going to have a padding. Top bottom, we're going to say that this is going to be something like 5. So here we're going to save this, and if we're going to go down over here, this is going to be our section. Now, we're going to start placing the containers over here, but in this case, we're going to use a container fluid. So we're going to say over here, and this is going to be a container fluid, and then this container fluid is going to have also a row, and over here, we're going to leave the class for now empty, because we'll just check it out how everything works. Now, like I said before, and so far, we have been working with just one column. However, if we remember that the magic number is 12, then over here, whatever we're seeing is going to get divided by 12, we can start understanding how we can work with a Bootstrap over here grid system. So let's say over here that I have this row, and I would want to add one column. So let's say, as always, I'm going to say that this is going to be a column, and this column also is going to have few other classes. Well, first going to say that this column is going to have a text center, and also we're going to say that this is going to have a background danger over here. Now, what I'm going to place over here within my first column, I'm going to say over here that I would want first to place the font awesome. Remember the icons that were downloaded? Well, now we're going to be implementing them. And in order to use font awesome, we need to write I over here. Then we're going to have to add few classes. So the first one is going to be FAS. So now I have I element with FAS class. And over here, this is going to be the name of the actual icon. So I'm just going to say over here that this is going to be my home icon. Now also what I would want is I would want to add size, but this size is going to come from actual font awesome. Later on in the course, we're going to look at how we can do our own sizing with a CSS, but for now, let's just use whatever the font awesome gives us. And they gives us pretty much this kind of syntax. So we're going to write FA, and then this number is pretty much the size. So if I'm going to say 5, this is going to be the bigger size, 3 is going to be smaller, and you get an idea. And over here, the last one is I just want to show you that we can use this Bootstrap classes with a font awesome over here as well. So I'm going to say over here text light. What this means is that I would want this font awesome to be light color. So once I save this, sure enough, see what I have. I have my font awesome that is light, and the whole column over here has this red background. Now, if I'm going to go back over here, you can see that if I delete this, this is not working right now. So this is just to show you what we're adding. And over here, if I would say 5, like I said, you can see that this is going to be bigger. Just I'm showing you so you don't think that I'm lying to you. So once we have this column, now let's check it out how we can add 2 columns. So let's say over here, if I'm going to go back up, and you can see that I have my column over here, and it actually ends over here. So what if I'm going to go over here and I'm just going to copy this? And over here, you can see that this is not what I would want it to do. And all I want to do is copy this column. So once I copy the column, check it out over here. Now I actually have 2 columns. Now let's change the background just so we can actually see better over here. And sure enough, what I have is 2 columns over here. One is going to be spanning half the screen and the other one. And you can see what happening is, again, we still need to remember that the magic number is going to be 12. And what's happening right now is Bootstrap sees that we have 2 columns and we haven't added any kind of width yet. We will going to be doing it this later on. But for now, all we're saying is we would want 2 columns and we would want to take them as much space as is actually possible. Now, before we actually look at more at the columns, let's do one more thing. Let's add over here a heading 3. And for this heading 3, we're just going to say this is going to be text dark. And over here, let's just write that this is going to be actually FA home, just so we can start remembering what the font awesome names are. So here, we're just going to write this is going to be FA home. And what I'm going to do over here is I'm just going to, again, copy this line over here. And we're going to say that this is, I'm going to copy this, and we're going to go down over here and just copy and paste it. So now both of them are going to have FA home. Now, if we can have 2 of them, well, can we have 3? Well, let's try it out. So what I'm going to say over here, again, I'm just going to grab this guy over here, copy, and you can see that I actually messed up a little bit. I need to copy all the way over here, and let's copy and paste this. And what we have, well, now we actually have 3. So I can just start adding over here these columns, and Bootstrap is going to be dividing for me. So let's say over here, we're just going to change this, and we're going to say that this is going to be, well, you know what? No, let's keep this text light, but I would want to change the background. So instead of background info, let's do warning over here. And the last one, we're going to say that this is going to be some kind of different one. Because what I'm going to do, I'm going to add actually the 4th one. So right now we have 3. So you can see that 1 column, 2nd column, 3rd column. But I can obviously add as many as I want. Now, if it's not going to be able to fit it, you can see that it's going to wrap into the new line. Now, once we have created 3 columns, let's have a look what happens if we add a 4th one. So here we're going to check where is our actual column. So I'm going to copy this and copy and paste this. And once I have a new line over here, you can see that I have my 4th column. And as I'm expanding over here, now we're going to have a 4 columns over here. However, if we're going to be going down to a smaller size, you can see that this is going to wrap to the next line because there's not enough space. And over here, what I would want is I would want to add some kind of background. So I'm going to say over here that this would be a little bit of background. So I'm going to say that this is going to be success. So let's say over here that we're going to create this one as a success. So here, this is how we can actually use this. And you can see that I actually misspelled it over here. So now we have the success. So here we would have 3 columns. However, if we're going to go to a bigger screen over here like this, then we're going to have a 4th one. So this is how Bootstrap would be dividing the columns for us. So let's say over here, we're going to create 3 columns, not specifying any kind of width, and Bootstrap is going to divide it. And these columns are going to be this way, spanning from the smaller screen to a bigger screen. This is because we haven't added anything to these columns. So far, we only have this col and no width and no specific screen size. So far, we know that Bootstrap has a sum of 12 grid, and it is doing dividing for us if we're just adding a column like this. However, what if we would want to control the width for the specific column? Well, can we do that? Well, of course we can. So over here, let's create again another new section, and we're just going to call this that this is going to be end of first grid, and let's create another section. Now in this section, we're going to have a background green. So let's say over here that this is going to be a section. Now this section is going to have a class of background, and we're going to say over here success, and also we're going to have a padding top bottom over here 5. So let's save this, and sure enough, this is going to be our section. Now what we're going to have in the section, we're going to have again container fluid. Then with the container fluid, we're also going to have a row. So this is going to be the child is going to be row, and then we're going to have a few columns. So let's say over here, just leave these columns as it is. So let me just save this over here, and now we have container fluid and row over here. Now what we're going to place over here in this row? Well, now we're going to look at how this sum of 12 helps us to actually divide and make the width for our own columns. So first we're going to write that this is going to be a column that we're going to be creating. However, the difference over here is I'm going to say that this column is going to be spanning 8. And also this column, what's going to happen is I'm going to say that this column is going to have a background. And let's say over here that this is going to be a secondary background, secondary. And also this column is going to have a font awesome inside. And let's do, you know what, let's do also a margin bottom 3. And let's do text center. So all these things are going to happen in this column. So this is going to be our first column. Now over here in the column, like I said, let's place a font awesome. So we're going to say I dot, and then we're going to have a FAS, and then we're going to have FA star. So this is going to be for our star. Now over here for the star, we also have a little bit of height. So let's say 3x over here. So what we have over here is once we save this, we have over here, this is going to be our star. And let's add one more text. Let's just say that this is going to be heading 3 and just the name. So we know that this is going to be the star. Now, once we have this first column ready to go over here, let's check it out how we can work with this column 8. So if we have column 8 and we know that the sum is going to be 12, we know that we have actually left over 4. So if we want to fill over here this column and have our own grid over here like this, what we need over here is to create this div that we have. However, we need to change it around. We need to make sure that this column is actually going to be spanning 4. And over here, I'm going to change this instead of secondary. We're going to change it to light just so we can see better. And sure enough, now we start actually creating our own grid. So what happens over here, instead of letting the Bootstrap to divide, like it evenly divided over here, I'm saying myself that I would want over here this column over here like this. This is going to be 1, this is going to be 8, and this is going to be 4. Now we're obviously not limited to these numbers. We know that the sum actually is what? We know that the sum is actually 12, right? So we basically know that it doesn't matter what we do, we can just keep on dividing by 12, and we can just, the sum needs to be that 12. So let's say if I want to create another 2 columns. Now I know that this row is already full. I have 8, and over here I have 4. But what I'm going to do over here is I'm just going to copy this over here, copy and paste this, And here I'm going to change this one around. So if this one was 8 and this one was 4, let's do it over here. Again, we know that the sum is 12. So over here, we're going to do 3 and 9. And let's change these ones around also. So over here, I'm going to say that this is going to be a light. And over here, this is going to be secondary. So now you can see how we are starting actually to control the grid ourselves. And as long as we make sure that the sum of these columns is going to be 12, then we're good to go, because we can just keep on adding as many columns as we would want. So here, if I'm going to go to a browser over here, you can see that this is going to be my first column, second, and then the third and the fourth. And again, as a matter of the width of the screen, the Bootstrap is going to keep these proportions because of the numbers that we created over here. And this is how we can work with a Bootstrap grid, where we actually specify the width of our columns ourselves. Now that we know the Bootstrap grid basics, let's check it out. What would be the shortcomings and how we can actually overcome them. So here we're going to say that this is going to be end of second over here grid. This is how we're going to call this. And now we're going to check it out how we can change this layout depending on the screen size over here. So let's say over here, again, we're going to create that this is going to be a section. So I'm going to say over here, this is going to be section, and the section is going to have just a simple class over here of BG over here light. And then it's also going to have a class of PY5. So over here, in this case, we're just going to add a padding top bottom over here 5. Now, once we have the section ready, now we would want to create again a container fluid and a row. And again, the setup for the most of the video is going to be exactly the same, but the end we're going to change some properties around. So here we're going to start the same way, like I said. So I'm going to have a container over here fluid. Then within the container fluid, we're actually going to place a row over here. We're going to say that this is going to be a row, and now we would want to place some columns. So we're going to start again over here. We're going to say that this is going to be a column. In this case, let's just say over here that this is going to be a 4. And once within the column, now we would want to have a font awesome over here. But before we do this, let's actually place just a single column over here. So now we know that this is going to be our single column and of single column. So this is going to make it easier for us to copy and paste later on. And once we have the column, let's do font awesome. We're going to say over here FAB. So this would not have be FAS. This is going to be FAB. And over here, we're going to say FA. Over here, HTML5. So now we're going to look at HTML icon. And over here, let's do again the size. So we're going to say over here 3x. And then we're going to say text info class, just to make it light blue. Now, once we have this font awesome, sure enough, over here, this is our font awesome. And over here, let's place a text. Let's just say over here, this is going to be a heading. Let's do 2, heading 2. Let's do text capitalize. And let's also do text dark. And let's do some padding over here. So let's do padding top bottom over here 3. So now once I have this, let's write learn HTML over here. And last, let's just have a paragraph over here like this. Let's say over here, this is going to be paragraph of, I don't know, again, 20 words. So for this paragraph, we're just going to have a text muted class just for this grayish color. And over here, we're going to say this is going to be lorem 20 over here. Lorem 20. And once we have it, now we have the text. Now, like I said, let's grab the columns and let's look at what's going to happen. So we know so far over here like this. We're going to copy and paste this one time, second time. And over here, let's change the HTML5. We're going to change it to CSS3. And over here, this is going to be JavaScript. So this one icon, let's change it to CSS3. And over here, this one changed to JavaScript. And also, let's actually change what we are learning. So here, we're going to say CSS. And over here, this guy is going to be JS. So once we save it, now we have 3 of them. And like I told you, over here, you can see that where the problem is starting. You can see that because I have a text, and if I have them side by side like this, if I'm using this column width, like over here, it was fine because the actual columns are small. There's nothing really in there. However, the more you start actually placing in a column, this does not look good in a small screen. Now, obviously, if I'm going to a bigger screen, it's getting better and better. It's already looking good. However, if I go to the smaller screen, this does not look very pretty. And what would be the solution? Well, the solution is that we can change over here this column, over here the actual width of the column, depending on the actual screen size. So you see over here, I've written over here that starting from the extra small screen, this is going to be occupying these 4 columns, which is going to be what? Like 33% of the screen, right? Now, over here, what if I would change this? What if I would write over here SM4? So what I'm saying is from the extra small screen, actually occupy the whole width, this column. Then once you get to the small screen, which is going to be bigger, obviously, than this right now, then you only split in 3, I'm sorry. So 3 columns. Basically, what I'm saying is whenever you have enough room, which is my opinion, this is going to be small. So starting from the small screen, then only do this division. So let me go over here and add to all of them over here like this. So I'm going to say starting from the small screen, then you should split up. But in the extra small screen, which is right now, this is the extra small screen. You see what happens? Now actually occupy the whole thing. Now where I'm getting this, if I'm going to go to a Bootstrap documentation, you can see over here what happens. See over here we have the actual widths and we have what would be the prefix. So you see over here from the extra small screen, this would be less than 576 over here. Then we're using this column. However, if we would want only this width to change starting from the small screen, so extra small, we would occupy the full width. Then we would write small over here. Now, if we're going to write medium, that means from the extra small screen and the small screen, the column width is going to be 100. It's going to be occupying the whole space. However, once we get over here, then it's only going to split. So let's just check it out how it happens. So let me refresh over here. You can see that I have 3 columns. Now, as I'm going over here, less, you can see over here how they're dividing. Now, once I get to the extra small, now they're occupying the whole space. However, over here, you can see that right away they split in 4. So if we know that we can actually control this, let's change this small to medium. So we're going to say over here, medium, and over here, we're going to say medium. So all of them, again, are going to be medium. So now this change is going to happen when the screen gets somewhere over here, let's say, right? So again, if I'm going to refresh, you can see that starting from the extra small screen, everything is occupying the full column. I keep on going. You can see that I'm past the actual small screen. I'm still having this division of actually 100%. Once I get past the medium, so starting from medium, I actually get this layout that I wanted. So this is how we can control the actual width of the columns depending on the screen size. Because if it's going to be less than what we specified over here, this is just going to take the whole screen. So this would be the mobile view over here, what we're seeing. And now that we have looked at how we can control the width of the columns depending on the screen size, let's actually also check it out how we can change the whole layout depending on the width of the screen. And for this, what I'm going to say over here is I'm just going to copy the whole section over here. So I'm going to check it out, where is my section, and I'm just going to copy the whole section. So I'm going to select the whole thing, and over here, we're just going to copy and paste this over here. So I'm going to copy and paste this. I'm going to go up over here. I'm going to say that this is going to be a last section over here in this project. And I'm just going to change the background over here, just so you can see a little bit better. So I'm going to say over here, danger. And if we're going to go down over here, now I can see that this is going to be our last section. And also let's change right away, maybe a colors. Let's say over here, and this is going to be text white. So I'm changing the colors for a font awesome. So text white over here, and the last one also is going to be over here, text white. Now once we have this over here, now we have over here our font awesome and all the icons over here. Now all the columns are working. However, what if we would want to change the actual layout? What if we wouldn't want to keep this all the time? Let's say dividing by 3, so spanning, let's say 33%. Well, we can actually do this. So let me go back over here and write that starting from the small screen, this is going to be, let's say, 4. But instead of 4, let's say that this is going to be 6. So what I'm saying is, on the extra small screen, keep the full width. However, once you get to a small screen, have the size over here of 6. Okay, now we're going to keep on moving, and we're going to say over here that this is going to be starting from the small screen. We're going to say that this is going to be 6 also. And the last one, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to write that starting from the small screen, let's have it 6 over here. Now, once I actually save this, let's check it out what would happen in the browser. So I'm going to refresh over here, and you can see that starting from the small screen over here, these ones take up the half the size over here. This one is 6, this one is 6, so this is going to be 12. And then this guy is in the next line because it didn't fit in this one, so it started a new line. Okay, but what if I would want to get to the medium and change it around? What if I'd want to fit all of them in a medium? Well, we can certainly do this. All we have to do is over here, we're just going to write that this is going to be column, medium over here, and we're going to say what kind of width again we would want. So again, we're going to do the same thing over here. We're going to say that this is going to be 4. So let me save this over here. Let me go down again. I'm going to copy and paste this and see what we have over here. So once we refresh, now from the medium, this is already split in 3 columns instead of 2. So now we have changed the layout 3 times. First, it was the extra small screen. Then we got to the small screen over here. So this was our 2-column layout. And then we got over here to this 3-column layout starting from the medium. But we're obviously not done yet. We can also do a large one. So let me go back over here, and I'm going to say column, and let's say large. And in this case, let's do a little bit of funky layout. And let's say that this is going to be 3. Then this is also going to be 3. And you know what? Now this is going to be, let's do this one 6, the middle one. And the last one, let's do again 3. So I'm going to say over here, column large, and we're going to say 3 over here. Now once we save it, check it out what we have. Starting from the large screen, check it out what happens. Now we change the layout one more time, because now this is going to be occupying only 3, and then the middle one over here is going to be more. And obviously, as we're going to be working with the project, this is what we're going to be doing. We're going to be changing the layouts. We're going to be looking at the different screen size. We're going to be making columns wider or smaller. But the main idea is that you're not limited to just placing all the columns in one. And we're not limited just adding one kind of screen width. We can do pretty much anything what we would want. However, what we need to remember is the prefixes for the actual screens. And also what we need to remember always is the fact that the sum needs to be 12. Otherwise, this is going to be spanning in a new line.